Hello and welcome to Rain's Kitchen and Garden. My name is Rain. Today I'm making some delicious old-fashioned white bread. This is a part of my bread baking series. I hope you enjoy it. Let's make some delicious bread. I've got a small bowl here, and in my measuring cup I have a 1/4 cup of whole milk and I have a 1/4 cup of water. That's about 60 mils of each, and I've heated this up to 105 degrees Fahrenheit. You can heat it up to 105 to 115 Fahrenheit or 40 to 46 Celsius. And I'm putting that in my bowl. And in the bowl I'm putting 4 teaspoons, that's about 19 grams of active dry yeast, and I'm going to sprinkle that in. Don't just dump it in because it'll form a big clump and it'll be hard to dissolve. So just sprinkle that on top of your warm water and warm milk. Okay. And I have a pinch of brown sugar. And for those who don't know what a pinch is, what you do is you take your fingers, you pinch. I mean, I can't do it here, but in your sugar you pinch, and then you just plop. Pinch and plop. So I've got a fork, and I'm just going to mix that around until the yeast is all incorporated. The warm liquid is melting my brown sugar at the same time too, so that works really well. All right. The reason why we proof our yeast, I believe, for the most part, is to make sure that it actually is active. We're going to put a piece of cling film on top of this and let it sit in a warm spot for 10 minutes. And after the 10 minutes, it should be nice and foamy. If it's not foamy and it looks exactly the same, then you probably have yeast that is no longer active, and you should start all over because your bread will not rise. Okay, so I've mixed that up well. I'm covering it with cling film, and I'm going to put a tea towel over that, and I'm going to leave it on the counter for 10 minutes and then come and check on it. Okay, let's check on our yeast mixture here. I think we're going to be okay. I can see that it's really foamed up already. Oh wow, yes, that is really foamed up. Let me try to show you. See, it's all nice and foamy. I'm going to set that aside just for now. I've got a very, very large bowl here. And in this bowl, I'm going to add the rest of my warm milk, which is 1 3/4 cups or 440 mils. And I heated that up the same to 105 to 115 Fahrenheit or 40 to 46 Celsius. And I've got some melted unsalted butter. I have 2 tablespoons. That's about 28 grams. I also have 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. That's about 24 grams. And I have a tablespoon of salt, which is about 18 grams. I'm going to mix that all up together. And again, that warm milk should melt my brown sugar. All right, now I'm going to add some bread flour. I have 2 cups of bread flour. That's 260 grams. Sorry about that. And I'm going to mix that all up until it's nice and creamy. Okay, that's nice and creamy. Now we'll grab our yeast mixture and add that to the bowl. Sorry, I keep banging my bowl. I don't mean that to be annoying for you. Just Trying to get my hand out of the way of the camera. All right, let's mix that in. And I'm going to add 1 more cup of bread flour. That's about 130 grams. And mix that well. Now I'm going to add the rest of my bread flour. The remaining bread flour is about 3 cups. That's 390 grams. And I'm going to add that a little bit at a time, like 1 scoop at a time, and combine it. And when it gets a little too hard for me to combine it with my spatula, I'm going to turn it out onto my work surface and incorporate the rest of the flour that way. The original recipe calls for using a kitchen mixer with a dough knead paddle on it, I think it's called. I don't have a kitchen mixer, so I've adapted this to be able to do it by hand, because a lot of people don't have a kitchen mixer. Having one would be so much easier. It would be nice. That's on my wish list one of these days, to have a kitchen mixer. But until then, I do everything by hand, or I use other appliances. But if you have a kitchen mixer, by all means, use it. And in the description below, I will leave a link to the original Williams-Sonoma recipe, because I use brown sugar instead of white sugar. I like the taste of brown sugar, so that's why I use that. And I use whole milk. You know, you might want to use 2% milk. You have to kind of use the ingredients that you like. Okay, it's getting a little hard on my hands right now, so I'm going to turn my dough out onto my surface. But before that, this is all the remaining flour I've got here. I'm just going to grab some of it and put it on my work surface, because I'm going to be kneading the rest in. And then I'll add what I need after. So let me turn that out onto my work surface here. There we go. All right. Get all that stuff out. Before I get my hands filled with flour, what I'm going to do is, I've got some light tasting olive oil here. I'm going to pour that into my bowl. Just a little bit, maybe a couple of tablespoons, okay? Because we're basically going to be putting the dough back into this bowl after everything is kneaded, and that's where it's going to rise. So we want to make sure the bowl is nice and oiled. So I'm going to put a little bit of that flour onto my hands, try to get everything off the spatula here. And away I go. If you're kneading by hand, it'll take anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, but if you're using a kitchen mixer, it could take anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes to achieve the same result. Now, the process of kneading has many uses. It combines all the ingredients, it distributes the yeast, and it releases gases produced by the growing yeast to strengthen and moisten the gluten strands so that you get a nice springy elasticity, and it really ensures a good rise. Well, I was kneading for about 11 minutes, and I know that my dough is ready. I've pretty much incorporated all of the flour. There's maybe a spoonful left, but it doesn't need any more flour because it's beautifully smooth and elasticy now. Okay, it's elasticy. You can kind of manipulate it a little bit, and it's smooth. And listen, your hand sticks to it, but there's no dough on your hand, so it's ready to go. So I'm going to place this into that bowl that has the oil in it and get that well covered with oil. And I'm going to put cling film over that with a tea towel and put it into a nice warm spot for about 90 minutes until it doubles in size. Well, I've greased 2 of my loaf pans with butter. You can use whatever method you want to grease your pans. And they're sitting, waiting. And let's take a look at our bread dough. It should have doubled in size, and it definitely doubled in size, if not tripled. The yeast that I have works so well. Okay, so I'm going to flour my surface here. Just a little bit of flour so nothing sticks. And I'm going to turn out my dough onto my surface. There we go. Flour my hands a little bit. And I'm going to cut this in 2. If you really, really want to be accurate, you could use a scale and cut it in 2 that way. I don't necessarily need to. I like to kind of eyeball it. This is a very handy tool. This is actually, I don't know if they call it a spatula or not, but I didn't find this in any cooking section. I found it in the hardware store actually. They use it for plaster, I think, but it works really well with cutting up dough. And also for cleanup after. If you got something sticky on your counter, it works really well for cleanup. Okay, I'm going to put one aside for now. What I'm going to do is pat this down into a long rectangle. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm going to fold it in 3, tri-fold like an envelope. Turn it over, seam side down, pat it again down to a rectangle. All right, then I'm going to fold it and roll it. Just so it's a little longer than my loaf pan. I'm going to tuck in the ends, seam side down, into my loaf pan, and I'm going to pat it so that it fills the bottom of the loaf pan. Okay, that's loaf number 1. I'm going to do the same thing with the second one. Pat it down into a long envelope, into a long rectangle. I'm getting ahead of myself here. A little tri-fold into an envelope. Put it seam side down, pat it down again. The reason I'm patting it down is because I'm trying to make sure that the dough is even. If it's thicker on one end and thinner on the other, it's not going to cook well or bake well. Okay, let's fold that and roll it out till it's just a little longer than your loaf pan. Tuck in the ends, seam side down into the loaf pan. Press that down. Okay. So now I'm going to put some cling film on top of both of these loaf pans, and I'm going to let them rise for 1 hour in a nice warm spot until they rise about an inch above the rim of my pan. Let's take a look at our bread. It has definitely risen enough. I wanted it to rise about an inch above the rim of the pan, and I don't want it to spill over, but maybe you can see it's definitely risen that high. I have preheated my oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 190 degrees Celsius or gas mark 5, and I'm going to bake my loaves for about 40 minutes until they're golden brown and the bread pulls away from the sides of the loaf pans. The bread is baked, it smells amazing. I'm turning these out onto my cooling rack and letting them cool completely before I slice into them. Let me just turn them over here. I love how this turned out, and there's nothing like the fragrance of bread baking in the kitchen. Thanks so much for watching, my friends. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. See you next time on Rain's Kitchen and Garden. Bye!